No joint bank account on your spousal sponsorship file? IRCC's default assumption is that your marriage isn't real. That's not me being dramatic. Regulation 4 of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations gives officers the power to refuse your application on bad faith grounds, even if you love each other, even if you're legally married, even if everything else looks perfect. The thing is, most couples don't have a joint Canadian account. They can't, and nobody's telling them what to provide instead. Hi, I'm Bella Lee, a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. Spousal sponsorship is one of the immigration fields that I specialize in. In this video, I'm walking you through exactly what financial evidence to submit when a joint bank account is off the table, what carries weight with IRCC, what gets dismissed, and the one mistake that turns good evidence into a procedural fairness letter. Quick note before we get into it, this video is educational. It's not legal advice for your specific case. If you're navigating a spousal sponsorship application right now, the only way for you to get advice for your situation is a private consultation. This is video 3 in my spousal sponsorship evidence series. We've covered photos and communication. Today, we're on the piece most couples panic about: financial intermingling without a joint bank account. Here's the reality. If your spouse lives outside Canada, opening a joint Canadian bank account is usually not possible. The federal anti-money laundering rules require Canadian ID and a verified address that most overseas applicants simply don't have. If your spouse is already here on a visitor visa but doesn't have a SIN number yet, similar issue. Many banks won't add them to an existing account, even when they'll open a separate account in the spouse name. And IRCC knows this. Officers are not expecting a joint bank statement in an outland application. What they are expecting is that you reconstruct your financial life together using other evidence. The applications that fail aren't the ones missing the joint account. They're the ones where the applicant didn't replace it with anything credible. Let me start with the strongest stuff. The evidence officers take most seriously when joint banking isn't available. First, international remittances. Wire transfers from you to your spouse. Wise Western Union traditional bank wires. The companies sending them are legally required to verify the identity of both sender and receiver. So when an officer sees a remittance receipt, they're not looking at something you printed at home. They're looking at third-party verified proof that money moved from you to your spouse. Second, life insurance. If you've named your spouse as the primary beneficiary on a life insurance policy or your workplace pension, that's a direct statement that you view this person as your permanent family. Third, your will. A properly witnessed, ideally notarized will that names your spouse as executor or primary beneficiary. This is fiduciary trust at the highest level. Fourth, a power of attorney. Giving your spouse legal authority over your property is something nobody does in a fake marriage. And fifth, spousal RSP contributions. If you've opened a spousal RSP and you're funding it, that's tracked by the CRA. Moving that money out without massive tax consequences is nearly impossible. Officers know that. By all means, get these in place if you don't have them yet. Wills and life insurance designations can usually be set up within a couple of weeks. Now, the middle tier. Helpful, but with catches you need to know about. Joint travel, flight itineraries, boarding passes, hotel bookings showing both names, especially when paid from one partner's card for the benefit of the other. This proves that you spend disposable income to be physically together. It proves visitation, but on its own, it can read like a vacation. Pair with deeper commitment evidence. Secondary credit cards next, where your spouse is an authorized user on your account. Strong if you can get it. You're legally on the hook for their spending. Hard to obtain if your spouse doesn't have a SIN number or Canadian credit profile. And finally, utility bills, joint leases, and shared property. These are the gold standard for inland common law applications. But if your spouse is overseas, these are physically impossible. That's fine. Officers know. Then there's the weak tier, shared Netflix, family phone plans, joint Spotify. These add texture. They show day-to-day life. But the financial stakes are so low that a bad faith actor could absorb the cost easily. Same with personal expense logs. A spreadsheet showing you paid half the rent in November means nothing unless it's matched by actual bank transfers on the exact dates. Include this evidence by all means, just don't lean on it. And if you're realizing right now that most of your file sits in this tier, that's the kind of case I work through in a strategy session. The link is in the description and pinned in the comments. Now, here's the part most applicants miss completely and is the single biggest unused weapon in a spousal sponsorship file. Your Canada Revenue Agency tax documents carry enormous weight with IRCC. Massive. Here's why. The legal penalty for lying to the CRA is federal tax fraud. So when IRCC sees CRA documents that align with your immigration story, they presume those documents are true. 3 things to know. 1. The CRA has its own rules about when couples need to update their marital status after marriage or hitting 1 year common law. Those rules are worth confirming with a tax professional because your CRA file and your immigration file need to line up. 2. If a spouse lives outside Canada, the Canadian partner is still required to report their net world income on their Canadian tax return. Doing this correctly creates official government documentation that you treat your spouse as part of your economic unit. And 3, if their income is below the Canadian basic personal amount, the Canadian sponsor can claim the spouse amount on line 30300. The CRA accepting that claim is ironclad proof of cross-border financial support. If past returns are inconsistent with current marital status, there is a CRA process for that, a T180J adjustment, and it's worth talking through with a tax professional. Here's what nobody tells you. The pattern of your evidence matters more than the volume. 2 scenarios. Scenario A, 2 huge wire transfer, $20,000 total, both sent in the 3 weeks before filing. Scenario B, 36 monthly remittance of $500 each, going back 3 years to when the couple got married. Same total money, completely different signal. Scenario 1 reads as stage management. Officers are trained to spot sudden surges of financial activity right before filing. It looks manufactured, because often it is. Scenario B reads as a real marriage, ongoing support, continuity. That's what IRCC wants to see. Same rule applies to insurance designations, will updates, RSP contributions. The earlier these are set up, the stronger they read. Don't wait until the month before you file your application, and don't document dump. Sending 300 pages of unredacted statements showing every coffee purchase doesn't help. It actively frustrates officers and obscures your real evidence. Curate. Pick 1 statement per quarter. Highlight the specific transfers. Make the officer's job easy. And finally, the document most applicants skip and shouldn't, the letter of explanation. If there's no joint banking on the file, write a letter. Tell the officer why. Specific reasons. Maybe the spouse is overseas and federal regulations prevent it. Maybe they're here on a visitor visa without a SIN number. Maybe both partners deliberately keep finances separate because one of them runs a business with complicated tax structure. State it plainly, then walk the officer through the alternative evidence by name, by document number. Point them to the wills, the remittance log, the CRA notice of assessment showing the spouse world income. The letter of explanation is your chance to control the narrative before the officer assumes the worst. Use it. If you're building a spousal sponsorship application right now and you're not sure your financial evidence is going to hold up, book a strategy session. The link is in the description. That was video 3 in my spousal sponsorship evidence series. Next up is visits and travel, the piece that gets more spousal sponsorship files refused than any other, and the one IRCC verifies against a database you probably don't know exists. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in my next video.